I think Taylor Swift is getting peeved. I genuinely believe she was not on Blake's side. It's why Travis Kelce clearly unfollowed Ryan on Instagram. There's been a lot of this drama. Why else would he have done such a thing? It's starting to fall in line, and I wonder if Taylor is going to start working with Justin Side.
In Hollywood, image defines power, and Blake Lively understands that well. Yet the quiet actions of Justin Baldoni and Taylor Swift uncovered hidden truths, unraveling the polished narrative she carefully crafted.
Whenever an attorney writes something that is submitted and filed in federal court, they're basically doing it under penalty of perjury. So the judge can do one of two things. The judge can just make a determination that, you know what, there's a dispute as to facts. I'm going to let the deposition happen, but with certain rules, certain parameters that, it doesn't go everywhere. There'll probably be a conference on this. With regards, because when it comes to third parties, right? Taylor Swift is not a plaintiff or defendant here, or cross whatever. Judges tend to have some type of more want to protect their own time and privacy. Now, when you have allegations that there's witness tampering or deletion of text messages, which what we call spoliation of evidence, that is a red flag in the eyes of the court, because that takes away from getting to the truth and justice, which I don't know if I'm the one that always brings this up when I come into your show, Andy, but remember she made this claim, like, what I do is protected, and there's this defense of whether or not it's done in bad faith. If there are text messages talking about suing Baldoni, motivations for suing Baldoni, or doing this initial civil rights complaint, that is directly relevant to Baldoni's defense to this California law that supposedly people initially thought like, oh, that was a huge swing. So I believe the judge is going to be very concerned about these allegations. Will do one of two things: either make a ruling or ask for a conference and ask directly how the attorneys learn this. Now, do the attorneys have to reveal that? They may not have to under what's called the work product doctrine. So there's a lot of involved. But you're right, man. This is a huge swing, and
Blake Lively has always been admired as the embodiment of poise and perfection in Hollywood, but her recent revelations painted a very different image. When she publicly shared behind-the-scenes struggles, fans immediately rallied behind her, moved by her vulnerability. In interviews, she vividly described the challenges she claimed to have faced, presenting herself as a woman overlooked, unheard, and often pushed into uncomfortable situations. Headlines quickly amplified her words, framing her as the victim of an industry that too often silences women. Yet, as the details are examined more closely, her narrative begins to unravel. Blake alleged that she was railroaded into moments she didn't fully consent to, yet accounts from production insiders suggest otherwise. Sources claim she was deeply involved in shaping and refining crucial scenes, with some even saying she had full creative control. Many of the decisions she now paints as forced were, in fact, driven by her own input. This version of events doesn't completely align with the image of helplessness she has presented to the public. Her carefully chosen words, filled with both relatability and subtle accusations, drew sympathy with ease. To fans, she seemed like someone bravely standing up for herself. But behind the curtain, whispers emerged. Was this truly an unfiltered expression of her experience, or a strategically curated narrative designed to shield her from scrutiny? Crew members recall instances where Blake bypassed directors and asserted her own creative authority, altering projects to fit her vision while later framing those same choices as the cause of her discomfort. Patterns began to surface. Whenever criticism approached her decisions, a new victim story seemed to rise in its place. By putting her alleged struggles front and center, Blake not only garnered public support, but also shifted attention away from colleagues who might have offered different perspectives. It's a powerful strategy. Reposition the story so that dissenting voices appear unsympathetic, even when they may have valid experiences of their own. Industry chatter further complicates her claims. Scenes she described as spontaneous moments of discomfort were reportedly ones she had meticulously planned and controlled. The contradiction raises an unsettling question. Was it truly discomfort, or was it an attempt to rewrite history when outcomes didn't align with her image? The cracks in her account widened as additional voices from within the industry stepped forward. Many described a version of Blake that stood in stark contrast to the vulnerable figure she portrayed in interviews. For a time, her carefully crafted statements captivated audiences worldwide. But when set against the testimonies of those who worked closest to her, the polished narrative begins to lose its strength. Because here's the truth about controlling a narrative. You can decide where it begins, but you can't always decide where it ends. And Justin Baldoni's refusal to validate her claims exposed contradictions more glaring than ever. That's when the unraveling truly began.
But Brian Friedman responded to this. This was a letter where they, it should be noted, this was anonymously sourced, and they're just abusing us again, and this is categorically false, blah, 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 blah. There's no evidence. Meanwhile, it's not signed by Gottlieb. It's not signed, I swear by, this is false. It was signed by Ezra Hudson, a different lawyer, not from that firm, which was odd to me. It was a big red flag. Well, if you're going to come out so fiercely and deny it, maybe get the lawyer who's being accused to deny it themselves. Well, Brian was quick to point that out. In his response this morning that just dropped hot off the presses, we write in response to this letter to strike our motion to ask the court to strike my letter. The letter was submitted in response to Miss Lively's consolidated defendant, Miss Reynolds, together defense, on purporting to inform the court of their request to intervene in an action pending before a different federal court relating to a motion of Taylor Swift's company, Venable, to quash the subpoena served on them by my office. The premise of the motion is that I made a deliberate and shameless misinterpretation to the court and that the facts set forth in the May 14th letter are false and unfounded. That is not so. Attached here, too, as Exhibit 1, is an affidavit executed under penalty of perjury, stating the factual basis for the statements set forth in my letter. Notably, the motion is not signed by Michael Gottlieb. I noticed that too, Brian Friedman, whose conduct gave rise to my office's influence on a subpoena to Taylor Swift's company, but instead by another attorney from a different firm representing Lively. The motion also faults the May 14th letter for being filed without support of any kind, much less anything under oath. This opposition supplies the sworn affidavit that Lively argues the letter lacked. Finally, and most notably, the motion claims that the facts set forth in the 14th letter are unequivocally and demonstrably false, yet is unsupported by any sworn declaration to that effect, much less from Mr. Gottlieb. So basically, he's like saying, well, okay, I just swore that this is all real. Let's hear it from you, Mr. Gottlieb. Gottlieb, sorry if I'm saying that wrong. The motion further contends that the letter was improper because it does not seek any form of relief, is irrelevant to any motion currently pending before the court, so there's no legitimate purpose. Of course, the same could be said of the Lively's May 13th letter, which Lively claims to have submitted as a courtesy, in which she did not ask the court to take any action. The Lively defense claim the subpoena served on Taylor Swift seeks the Lively defendant's attorney's communication, including those of Michael Gottlieb, with no explanation as to how they could be relevant in this litigation. Given that Miss Lively herself admits in the letter that she did not ask the court to take any action, nor could she, given that the motion to quash the subpoena is pending there before a separate court, yada, 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 it is apparent the letter filled with the court besmirching the Wayfarer parties and their counsel, our response was necessary. He's like, this is why I'm responding, because this is completely ridiculous. They're doing exactly what we're doing, which they are. This is all both of these parties. It's not just Justin's side. Blake's side is doing it too. They are both playing this in the press. And when Blake's team tries to play like, oh, we're better, we're not doing this, we're not making this a circus. Come on. Everybody in the industry is laughing at you, Blake and Ryan. You look ridiculous.
Justin Baldoni has unexpectedly become the center of Blake Lively's explosive claims, yet his way of handling the controversy has been anything but ordinary. Rather than issuing loud defenses or emotional interviews like so many in Hollywood often do, he chose a quieter path, allowing his actions and the testimony of others to speak for him. And that silence has become one of the most striking aspects of the story. While Blake painted him as someone who overstepped boundaries and created uncomfortable situations on set, those who actually worked alongside him, both cast and crew, have described an entirely different man, professional, respectful, communicative, and deeply mindful of everyone's comfort zones. One insider even recalled how Justin made a habit of asking permission before attempting even the smallest change in a scene, making it clear that consent and collaboration were always at the forefront of his process, which stands in direct contradiction to the chaos Blake implied in her version of events. What makes his silence so powerful is that, in an industry where the loudest voices are often rewarded, Justin's refusal to engage publicly became its own kind of statement, reinforcing the credibility of those defending his conduct, and the consistency of those accounts only strengthened his position. Behind the scenes, details emerged that directly undermined Blake's narrative, including an incident she described as overwhelming and poorly managed. Witnesses from that same day said Justin actually took extra care to ensure everything unfolded with sensitivity and clarity, leaving little doubt about where the truth likely lay. This sharp contrast between her accusations and his reputation has not gone unnoticed in Hollywood circles, especially given Justin's long-standing image as a collaborator praised for his openness and integrity. For many, Blake's portrayal of him seemed less like reality and more like an attempt to reinforce her own carefully constructed victim narrative. What further tilted the balance was the subtle but deliberate involvement of Taylor Swift, who, without making loud public pronouncements, quietly added weight to Justin's side through precise and strategic actions that helped reshape how the controversy was being perceived. Unlike a dramatic clash of words, this was a battle of credibility, and the steady stream of accounts praising Justin's professionalism, combined with Taylor's carefully measured support, steadily eroded the impact of Blake's story. In the end, what began as Blake's attempt to project herself as powerless in the face of others has begun to crumble under the weight of testimonies, quiet resistance, and undeniable contradictions, leaving the industry to wonder whether her narrative was less about truth and more about controlling perception.
Let's call it another notch, let's call it, on the belt with regards to Lively's team acting in bad faith with regards to Discovery. First is the faux or the pretend lawsuit to justify the production of text messages. That's first one, right? And now, like, what is this? Now there's this other thing of trying to suppress evidence. And that would be another huge piece of evidence that the judge can justifiably, if it's, again, appropriately put before the judge, going like, look at Lively's team, look at how they're acting. We want serious sanctions. We want evidentiary sanctions, maybe terminating sanctions for this misconduct with regards to Discovery and trying to suppress evidence. This can have huge repercussions, which is probably, as I'm talking about it, I think the judge will want to have a conference and be like, listen, this is serious what you're alleging. I want to know how you found this out. I don't know if the judge is really entitled to it. At
That's
least
what I was
in a
going to
public
ask.
forum.
How do you figure this out? How would what is there now attorney-client privilege that they're going to try to claim? But then I guess Friedman at some point's going to want to reveal it. I mean, if he's heard the source, he will probably give up this source for the sake of the client. No.
There was probably already in Friedman's office, there was probably already a decision that if push comes to shove, they're willing to get a declaration from somebody in order to really put teeth on this request, right? Because the judge is like, listen, if you really want this, if you really want me, the judge, to go on your side, Baldoni's team, Friedman, you have to give me something other than I just think this. And if you get a declaration from somebody, either a mole in Taylor Swift's camp or a communication that was from Baldoni and Baldoni to Friedman, they've probably already made the determination they're going to share that with the judge in what we call, at least what we call, the Latin word is in camera, which is in the judge's chambers and something only the judge can see to protect some type of work product, to satisfy the judge's need to be like, listen, this is a pretty big allegation. You have to support it somehow, other than I just have to take your word for it before I let you have a shot at examining Taylor Swift directly.
And there's no version where Blake can then blame this Michael guy. Like, well, they were acting without my interest. I mean, they are the attorneys for Blake. Is that something that she can then claim? Well, I didn't know they were doing this.
She can claim it. Whether or not it's believable or if it has any effect is another thing, because this is her. These are her agents, right? These agents in the sense of.
It reminds me of Johnny Depp. Blake did win one count because of what Adam Waldman said, which was Johnny's attorney, which they then deemed, well, that was Johnny's fault, even though it wasn't. But that would prove here too, as well, right? They are representatives.
They're representatives, and this is something else where Lively is on the ropes reacting to something that is so devastating, right? She had to react to the faux lawsuit in New York State. Now she has to react to this. And the more you explain, the more you're losing, the more complicated it is. Like, yeah, this may have happened, or I have to blame my attorneys, or I have to blame this. it falls flat with regards to the overall narrative. But the judge is going to take this really, really seriously, and really may put Friedman's team like, listen, you've put this down in writing. Now I want to know why it is that what's the basis for this really big allegation? It's a huge allegation, especially, I mean, even with not the stakes and the national attention or international attention, the stakes are so high. I think the judge is going to be very, very focused and want to do the right thing, but do it in a very transparent way before making a final decision, which will, I think, require telling Friedman, you need to make a showing, a factual evidentiary showing of how it is you even come to this conclusion before I allow you to take Taylor Swift's deposition, because it's not a normal thing. It's not like, we all had drinks together. Taylor's like, yeah, we had drinks together. This is communications that no one but the two of them would have known.
Taylor Swift and Blake Lively have long projected the image of an unshakable friendship built on public shoutouts, shared celebrations, and moments that fans held up as proof of their closeness. But as the storm around Blake's allegations grew louder, subtle signals began suggesting Taylor might not be standing as firmly in Blake's corner as everyone once assumed. And that realization shook the narrative in ways no loud declaration ever could. Taylor, after all, has built a career on the art of calculated communication. Nothing she does is without purpose, every move deliberate, every gesture carrying a weight far greater than it first appears, and in this case, her silence spoke volumes. While Blake's story dominated headlines, eagle-eyed fans noticed that Taylor withheld the kind of public support many expected. She didn't repost, like, or comment on any of Blake's claims, and at the very peak of the frenzy she appeared at an event where Justin Baldoni was also present, later sharing a photo from that gathering with the caption, "Surround yourself with people who lift others," a phrase that felt innocuous on the surface, but struck many as a pointed signal about where her loyalties lay. The whispers grew louder when Taylor dropped one of her signature playlists around the same time, curated collections she is famous for carefully crafting to reflect deeper messages. This one included tracks centered on deception, empowerment, clarity, and navigating chaos, leading fans to speculate that the timing and song choices weren't accidental at all, but coded commentary on the Blake situation. To those who know Taylor's style, the idea of coincidence seemed impossible. Her artistry thrives on intentionality, on embedding meaning in even the smallest choices, and that belief only magnified the playlist's perceived significance. Her refusal to offer Blake even the smallest visible show of support created ripples that quickly grew into waves. People who had initially accepted Blake's narrative at face value began revisiting the inconsistencies already emerging in her story, and Taylor's mere presence on the periphery seemed to highlight the cracks. But perhaps the most intriguing piece of the puzzle was the rumor of a quiet collaboration between Justin Baldoni and Taylor's creative team, a project never officially announced but whispered about in industry circles, leaving many to wonder whether Taylor was offering the strongest form of support she could without ever speaking a word. For some, the pattern became clear. Taylor didn't need to publicly declare allegiance because her actions, deliberate and understated, communicated exactly where she stood. Each move, whether it was a caption, a playlist, or the absence of endorsement, functioned as a carefully chosen brushstroke painting a picture of quiet alignment with Justin, and in doing so, she simultaneously cast doubt on Blake's version of events. The weight of Taylor's influence made all of this even more powerful. When someone with her reach and reputation chooses silence or subtlety, the effect resonates louder than any press statement. As these signals accumulated, the perception of Blake's claims began shifting rapidly, with Taylor's influence acting as a catalyst that intensified scrutiny and emboldened skeptics. By the time the whispers coalesced into wider industry conversations, it had become increasingly clear that Taylor's understated moves weren't random at all. They were calculated, consistent, and completely in character, and the ripples they created soon turned into waves that reshaped the entire narrative, leaving Blake's intentions under harsher light than ever before.
Ron, I think Taylor Swift is getting peeved. I genuinely believe she was not on Blake's side, maybe a little bit sort of forced against her will, and Blake was the one who was using it. And more we're seeing that was the case. It's why Travis Kelce clearly unfollowed Ryan on Instagram. There's been a lot of this drama. Why else would he have done such a thing? It's starting to fall in line, and I wonder if Taylor is going to start working with Justin's side to be like, you know what? I'm not getting involved in the drama, but fine, depose me. Let's prove they came after me at this point. It is what it is. I got to legally oblige. And that way people will feel for Taylor. They're not going to be mad at her. Blake will look awful. I mean, is there a version you think that could actually happen if she's really pushed to it legally?
Yeah, so I do believe, I think Taylor's team did what they were supposed to do, and every celebrity that's subpoenaed as a third non-party is going to do this, which is push back to sit down with anybody because they have to protect their brand. But there should be already machinations internally that are working to make sure that there's a protective order with regards to, if it's videotaped, it doesn't leave anyone's possession other than the attorneys. It never gets filed without meeting conferring first. But also telling Swift, listen, you just have to be short, sweet, and without emotion saying what happened and what these text messages say if they have something to do with the Lively. And those are really awkward conversations because Taylor Swift's brand is so, almost untouchable and uncorruptible that there's probably a fear that it might get tainted by showing and demonstrating how much she was interacting with Lively, and there is an association with Lively's tainted brand, let's call it.
But at a certain point, even she might have to push and say, "Yep, this happened." To cut her loose at a certain point, I imagine she might drive the bus over Blake at a certain point. Do you think it's possible?
It's possible if that's what the truth is, right? If the truth is, listen, we were friends and we were friendly and it was nice, but things turned dark and I wasn't agreeing. And yes, these text messages is her telling me what she wanted to do and me expressing not agreeing, then that's what the truth is. And the more Swift is transparent about that, the better it is for her. So at one point, the lawyers have to go, listen, the fight to prevent you from sitting down is not happening. Now we have to switch gears to be like, you have to be as transparent as possible with regards to what's relevant to the case.
And with something like this now on the forefront, it's more likely she's going to have to sit down, do you think?
If the judge makes a determination that there are text messages from Blake to anybody, let's hear Swift, where Blake is expressing the motivations for starting this fight, that is absolutely relevant because it goes to Blake's California defense that she was acting as a victim of domestic violence or harassment, sexual harassment rather, excuse me. Because again, it has to be made in good faith for that to have any teeth. And if she's blurting out to friends that like she's just doing it for revenge and her husband thinks it's funny, that is evidence that would
Behind the scenes, Blake Lively wasn't merely a participant in the creative process. She was actively shaping it at nearly every level, from script adjustments to scene execution, with multiple sources describing her as someone who rarely waited for instructions, but instead stepped into a decision-making role that blurred the line between leading actress and creative authority, a level of control that directly contradicts her claims of being powerless when things went wrong. One example that has surfaced repeatedly in conversations about the fallout involves a particularly controversial scene that became central to her later complaints. According to crew members, Blake not only pushed for the emotional intensity of that moment, but even suggested last-minute changes on the day of filming, collaborating with the director to heighten its impact in ways that went beyond the original script. Yet this very scene was later cited in her grievances as evidence of misconduct, creating a striking tension between her creative influence and the victim narrative she has shared publicly. And it wasn't just an isolated case. Several accounts suggest Blake frequently wielded more control than she admits, with a former production assistant alleging that she often called the shots when situations didn't align with her vision, and another crew member noting her knack for making things bend to her will even if it meant ruffling feathers. These descriptions draw a portrait far different from the one she has painted, where she presents herself as overpowered and disregarded. Instead, the accounts suggest someone fully immersed in shaping outcomes. The contradiction becomes even sharper when examining her recent lawsuit, which frames her as a performer subjected to unwelcome improvisation and unexpected turns, when in reality, insiders argue she not only approved those elements, but often spearheaded them. Reports of internal communications strengthen this perspective, with emails and messages allegedly showing Blake giving direct input on how certain scenes should be performed, ironically including the very moments she now describes as inappropriate or uncomfortable. As these accounts continue to surface, the narrative she constructed begins to resemble a carefully woven but fragile web, one that seemed convincing until evidence began pulling at its threads. Her hands-on choices, once a symbol of her influence, have now become liabilities, exposing her to scrutiny she may not have anticipated. By asserting so much creative control, she undermines the image of helplessness central to her accusations, raising the question, if she was truly powerless, how do so many behind-the-scenes stories point to the opposite? What emerges instead is a picture of someone deeply involved in crafting the very moments she later condemned, a contradiction that has not gone unnoticed within the industry and one that casts serious doubt on the foundation of her claims, leaving observers to wonder whether her victim narrative is less about truth and more about calculated self-preservation.
The battle against Justin Baldoni continues. Multiple sources tell People exclusively that the actress's relationship with Swift is struggling as the singer faces a subpoena by Baldoni's legal team. I'll tell you right up, it was struggling when she read Blake Lively speaking about her friend in private and using her, labeling her dragon. That's a pretty hard thing to not see again. Like, whoa, that's what you think of me? I'm here to be your chess piece and you use me to get how you want. Oh, and then by the way, it turns out Justin maybe wasn't as bad as you kept telling me he was. And I'm seeing all this stuff come in and it clearly is more complicated. And now I'm being dragged in to this drama. Imagine being a friend with somebody like you would not want to be involved with that friend. You would look at them differently. Of course, that's what's happening here. So yeah, the friendship has halted. A source says close to Swift. Taylor wants no part in this drama. Another insider says that Lively and Swift, whose friendship can be documented go back to 2014, are indeed taking some space, but adds they are no longer friends. Okay. Okay. I mean, yeah, they're just not talking. We'll see if they can rekindle it, but I don't think they're going to be able to rekindle it now that they've been threatened with 10 years of text messages being released. Swift was really hurt after being implicated in this fight, but that the stars were working to put it all out behind them. You know where this source is coming from? Blake Lively. This is a Blake Lively source. This is not a Taylor Swift source. According to a complaint Baldoni filed in January, Lively referred to the pop star as one of her dragons. However, a source close to Legal Bass says when the subpoena was served, that fractured the fragile peace between Lively and Swift, who is godmother to the actress's 4 kids with her husband, Ryan Reynolds. Now, don't forget, Travis Kelce also unfollowed Ryan, which was a telling sign that all was not well. And what's even bigger of an sell is, no, it's been 2 days, and Taylor Swift's team has not put the kibosh on this. Taylor Swift's team puts the kibosh on anything they don't like. Notice when her publicist tree went out there to shut down the Joe Alwyn marriage wedding rumors. Like, when she wants to shut something down, Taylor gets it shut down. I've never seen anybody get something as fast shut down on X through Elon Musk than Taylor Swift did when she called out the AI-generated images of herself. You can't post an AI image of Taylor Swift on the platform anymore because her lawyers are that litigious that even Elon and X were like, okay, don't put Taylor up. But anybody else can get trolled and harassed all day long. But Taylor, no, we can't afford to have Taylor get harassed. That's how good her team is. So you're telling me, Swifties, that now, all this time later, she still isn't correcting the record. You're telling me that she's allowing a story out there to imply one of her best friends, that the Swifties, some of them are still trying to defend. Her best friend threatens her. And you're telling me Taylor is not correcting the record? I mean, what's it going to take? What's it going to take? Because I'll tell you what I think's happening here.
Blake Lively's story of victimhood painted her as a woman swept up in a storm she could not control, but mounting evidence suggests she may have been the one orchestrating much of that storm herself, with insider communications and production details exposing a level of control that completely undermines her claims of helplessness. Emails exchanged during filming reveal Blake's influence over key moments, showing she was far more than a passive performer. One in particular stands out, where she negotiated how a controversial scene should unfold, offering specifics about timing, emotional beats, and even suggesting additional improvisation to intensify the rawness of the moment. Only for that very scene to later become the centerpiece of her accusations about being blindsided and overpowered, an undeniable contradiction. That raises serious questions about her narrative. How could someone who meticulously planned the beats of a scene later frame it as an unexpected violation? Further accounts point to Blake directly overriding directors and asserting herself in creative decisions, with former crew members recalling how her voice often became the final word on set, describing her as someone unafraid to steer scripts or reshape dynamics when things didn't align with her vision, behavior that speaks more to a leader in command than a powerless figure. Even more troubling are reports of Blake pushing for adjustments that left co-stars uncomfortable, only to later cite those same moments as proof of her own mistreatment, a pattern that witnesses described as strategic, with one bluntly stating, "She knew exactly what she was doing. The end goal always seemed to favor her side of the story." This isn't the portrait of someone victimized by circumstance, but of someone carefully curating events to bolster a narrative that would later protect her image. As these accounts surface, the cracks in her story widen into chasms. Decisive language in emails, assertive interventions during tense scripts, and eyewitness testimony all reveal a woman exercising authority, not suffering from its absence. The troubling implication is that the very moments Blake now frames as violations were once choices she not only approved but actively shaped, suggesting manipulation rather than vulnerability at the heart of her narrative. This doesn't just damage her credibility, it risks casting doubt on the culture of accountability in Hollywood itself, raising the chilling question of how genuine survivors can have their stories taken seriously when someone with Blake's influence appears to have bent the truth for personal protection. What once appeared to be an authentic cry for recognition now looks increasingly like a carefully staged defense mechanism unraveling under scrutiny, exposing a curated facade rather than an honest testimony. Her actions didn't just divide a set, they may have distorted the broader conversation about consent and power in the industry. And as her version falters, the contrast becomes even starker when set against Justin Baldoni's quiet professionalism, consistently described by colleagues as considerate, communicative, and respectful, and Taylor Swift's subtle but powerful moves, which, without ever issuing a direct statement, signaled alignment with Justin in ways fans and insiders couldn't ignore. Together, their reputations form a mirror reflecting how far Blake's narrative drifts from the reality others experienced, and the shift in perception has been dramatic, tilting sympathy away from her and toward those she accused. In the end, what emerges is a cautionary tale. Manipulation and blurred storytelling can inflict as much harm as the injustices they claim to expose, and Blake's control on set, once her greatest asset, has now become the most damning evidence against her, reshaping not only how the industry views her, but also how it grapples with the fragile line between truth and narrative in Hollywood's culture of accountability.